Given the size of our family, it probably comes as little surprise to you that we are members of both Costco and Sam's. We go to both places because candidly there's some stuff that one store has that the other doesn't. If somehow you could combine it, that would make life simpler for everyone, but until such time that there's a takeover, that's not going to happen. Anyway, so we go to both places. If you have ever been or have been or even are members currently of either store, you're aware of the fact that just because you see an item there today does not mean that it's always going to be there. For example, there are some items that are staples that they're always going to have bread and milk and eggs. You can always find ketchup by the gallon. You can always buy 9,000 rolls of toilet paper at one time. You can always find that kind of stuff. But there are other items. Sometimes it's because it's a seasonal item, or in some cases, there's not necessarily what appears to you as the shopper any rhyme or reason, but there is a product that's there today that may not be there later. For example, and because of that, it's sometimes difficult or puts you in a difficult position. Just for example, back in, I would say late August, early September, I had been to Costco, and I found a pair of tan pants. And one of the things that I appreciate about Costco, and I wish that Sam's will do the same thing, is that both stores take and they put the price of an item in an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper above the item. But something that Costco does is that when an item is not going to be continued, you'll see an asterisk up in the top right corner. You want to jot this in your Bible. It'll help you. John 3:16, asterisk at Costco. Anyway, if you see that asterisk, it means that whatever is there is not going to be resupplied. Whenever that amount is gone, then the item is gone. And so back around late August, early September, I was there and I saw this pair of tan pants and I thought, maybe I may like those. And so I bought a pair. I brought them home and tried them on and wore them, and I thought, no, I like these pants. I was getting ready to go to Peru there at the end of September, and I thought, I'm going to buy another pair. I'm going to take those with me. While I was on that trip, I thought, man, I really, really like these pants. And so when I got back, I thought I may want to get some more of these. And so I go to Costco. It's, mid-September at this point. And I go over and I see where they are, and then I look up and I see what I refer to as the Death Star. The asterisk is on top, or in the top right corner of this. So that means whatever is there is there. And once these are gone, it's too late. So I added another pair to my buggy, and I thought, okay, that's good. And so I went about getting whatever else it is that we needed to get that day. And then I thought, if those things are going to be gone, so I went and I got a second pair and put it in my buggy. And then I headed about to the rest of the store, and I thought, you know what? I may very well kick myself if I don't go ahead and buy another pair while they're still here. So I bought 3 pairs. All told, I wound up with 6 pairs of these pants. Let me just say to you that normally I don't buy 6 pairs of pants. But the reason I did so is because I thought if I wait, these things are going to be gone. And once they're gone, they live only in my memory. So if I wait, I may miss out. So even the prospect of waiting and the consequence of the prospect of waiting led me to do something that normally I would not do. Waiting in general oftentimes causes us, or sometimes even the prospect of waiting causes us to act in ways that normally we would not. For example, maybe you have experienced it yourself and you did this, or maybe you've been in line at the DMV or a long line at Walmart or something like that is going on, and you're waiting in this onerously long line and it's miserable and you've got stuff that you need to do, places that you need to be, stuff that you would rather be doing, but you're sitting in line and you find yourself like fussing out loud. Like, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know what's broken. Dummies. Government at work. I don't know, whatever you would say. But normally you wouldn't act like that. Normally you wouldn't say that. Normally you would not be just furious if someone kind of cut in line. But because you've been waiting, you act in ways that otherwise you would not. Again, the principle is this. Waiting and the experience of waiting, even the prospect of having to wait, can lead you to act in ways that otherwise you would not. And when I say act in ways that otherwise you would not, I don't mean in a good way. How many of you have ever, because of waiting, acted even better? Right? It doesn't work that way. It always works in the negative. We've been in a series now for a few weeks where we are looking at the example of the people of God from the time they left slavery in Egypt until they get to the Promised Land. They are being guided by, they're following God. And it's a series that I've called Road Trip. And I know that our experience is different than theirs. We're not physically moving necessarily from one place to another with a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. But if you have a relationship with the Lord, you are experiencing a walk with God. You are experiencing a journey with Him. He is guiding you. And there's going to be experiences that you have along the way. And the encouragement of this series is to pay attention to the lessons that they demonstrated from their walk with God so that it might positively impact your walk. What we're going to see this morning, though, is this. These Old Testament people of God had to wait. And because they waited, they wound up doing some stuff that I think in the scheme of things otherwise they would not have. And it demonstrates to us the peril or the danger that waiting can present you with. And our hope is that we learn from their mistakes so that we don't repeat them ourselves. So what did they do? What should we learn? Look with me in your Bibles to Exodus chapter 32. Exodus chapter 32. I don't know what we're going to do for lunch after church. We could either have Sam's or Costco. Exodus 32. All right, so we're told in verse 1 of Exodus 32, when the people saw that Moses delayed in coming down from the mountain, they gathered Aaron and said to him, "Come, make gods for us who will go before us, because Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we don't know what's happened to him." And so Aaron replied, "Take off the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons, your daughters, and bring them to me." So all the people took off their gold rings that were on their ears and brought them to Aaron. He took the gold from them, fashioned it with an engraving tool, and made it into an image of a calf. And then he said, "Israel, these are your gods who brought you up from the land of Egypt." If you would skip down to verse 19, the same chapter. At this point, Moses has come down from the mountain. We're told as he approached the camp and he saw the calf and the dancing, Moses became enraged. He threw the tablets, these are the ones containing the Ten Commandments, out of his hand, smashing them at the base of the mountain. He took the calf they had made, burned it up, ground it into powder, scattered the powder over the surface of the water, and forced the Israelites to drink the water. And Moses said to Aaron, "What did these people do to you that you have led them into such a grave sin?" He said, "Don't be enraged, my Lord. You yourself know that the people, they are intent on evil. And they said to me, 'Make gods for us who will go before us, because this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him.' So I said to them, 'Whoever has gold, take it off.' They gave it to me. I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf." I love this story. But I hope that you might come to love and appreciate it for other reasons, more specifically that it might have a positive impact on your walk with God. Let's get some context. The children of Israel have been following the guidance, the supernatural guidance of God for weeks on end. You remember by day it was a cloud, by night some sort of light. It's described as a pillar of fire that they could even travel at night. But they're not traveling every day, all day long. And it's a massive group of people, and so it's kind of plodding progress as God continues to guide them. We got close last week to Sinai, but if you go back to chapter 19, you'll read that the children of Israel are now encamped around the mountain of Sinai, and God invites Moses for a unique experience, that he might come up on the mountain with him. And if you're familiar as to what's going on around Exodus 19, God invites Moses up the mountain, and among other things, he's going to give him the Ten Commandments and then the whole of the law, that he might share that with the people. And so God gives some very specific instructions, and there's some tangible ways that God demonstrates himself. There's this dense cloud that settles on the mountain. There is this thunder, and God is speaking to Moses. And repeatedly, God gives him some instructions, and he tells him to go back and tell the people this. All right? So Moses has told the people, listen, God wants me to have this time with him. He's going to instruct all of us through me. Let me have this time with him. You will wait here, and then the next chapter will begin at some point. So he's been up and down several times, and the last time that he's been up, he's been for roughly 40 days. And so as chapter 32 begins, we're told the people saw that Moses delayed in coming down from the mountain. And so one day has turned into 2 days have become a week, 1 week has become 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it's 40 days, and the people are getting concerned. And so they get concerned to the point where they gather their numbers and they go to Aaron. Aaron is not only a priest, Aaron is going to become the nation's first high priest. He's also the brother of Moses. And so they say to him, hey, Aaron, how about making us some gods who go before us? Because Moses, well, we don't know what happened to him. And so Moses, and what's interesting, you don't see that he is coerced. They don't beg him. They don't plead with him. They don't put a gun to his head. He's like, okay, get your jewelry, put it in a pile. And even though we know what he tells Moses later, the passage tells us that he took the gold from, he fashioned it with an engraving tool. This doesn't accidentally happen. And so he fashions this image that looks like a golden calf, and then once he's gotten it, he tells the people of God, Israel, this is your God that brought you out of the land of Egypt. And then there is this festival that begins. There's dancing and there's sacrifices. There's offerings that are being offered now to this little tiny baby cow. All right, so Moses at this point doesn't know what's going on, and of course God does. And so the Lord instructs Moses while he is on the mountain with the Lord, receiving the commandments. God is etching into the stone the tablets, what we would know as the Ten Commandments. He's having this amazing experience with the Lord. And God says, Moses, you need to go down because the people are acting way, way out of bounds. It's gotten out of control and they have crafted an idol. And Moses comes down, and you've got to think there's this part of him that thought, oh, certainly not. There's no way that's going to down here worshiping an idol. And lo and behold, he comes down, and there's Aaron, his own brother, the priest of the nation, and there's this blessed golden calf, and people are dancing around before it. They've offered sacrifices and offerings, and Moses is furious. He's the first guy to break all of the Ten Commandments, and he has them on on tablets. He smashes them to the ground. He destroys this idol. But then he goes to Aaron and he asks this question: what did these people do to you? How in the world did you wind up in this spot? How did collectively we as the people of God wind up at the base of the mountain of God worshiping an idol? What I want you to understand, though, is this. If you had gone to Aaron 3 months before and said, hey, Aaron, suppose one day the people said to you, hey, how about making us an idol? What would you say? Fat chance, not going to do that. What if they said, hey, we'll give you all of our jewelry and you can melt it down and make something out of it that we can worship? Would you do it? No, there's no way I would ever do that. I mean, there's only one true God. I'm the one who's responsible spiritually to connect you with Him, to intercede for you as the priest. There's no way that I would do something like that. But lo and behold, He does, doesn't He? How did somebody like Aaron And this is not just an ordinary Joe. This is the priest of the people of God, the brother of Moses. This is a guy who's had a front row seat to all these amazing demonstrations of the power of God. How in the world does Aaron wind up doing this? I'll tell you, it's because he and the people of God were waiting. And let me just caution you, you may already know this, but underline this in your mind and on your heart. As you wait, waiting can be a dangerous place to be. Now, I say that not that you and I can avoid waiting. If you are a follower of God, if you have a relationship with Him, there are going to be times, sometimes short, sometimes seasons of time, where you are waiting on the Lord. It may be that you have petitioned God and you're waiting on an answer. You're waiting for God to guide. You're waiting for the next step. You're waiting for a door of opportunity to open or present itself. You're waiting for God to work in some particular circumstance. You're waiting on God. And as you wait, whether that is a period of hours, days, weeks, months, or even years, that waiting can be a dangerous season because you can find yourself during that season of waiting doing some things that otherwise you would never, ever think you would ever do. But why is it so dangerous? I think based on what we see here, I think first of all, waiting can tempt you to doubt God and His people. Waiting can tempt you to doubt God and His people. To understand more fully what's going on in chapter 32, if you can, flip back a few pages to Exodus chapter 19. This is when this whole process begins where Moses goes up the mountain. And between chapter 19 and chapter 32, you see what God does in giving the law and spelling out all of these instructions. Chapter 19, we're told in verse 3 that Moses went up the mountain to God, and the Lord called to him, and He said, "This is what you should say to the house of Jacob," and explain to the Israelites. He reminds them, verse 4, "You've seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I carried you on eagle's wings, and I brought you to myself. Now, if you'll carefully listen to me and keep my covenant, you will be my own possession out of all the peoples. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be my kingdom of priests and my holy nation." These are the words that you're to say to the Israelites. So God says to Moses, I want you to tell the people, if they will stick with me, if they will do what I say, I'm going to make them a special group of people among all the peoples of the world. So Moses hears that. He goes down. In verse 8, the people all responded together, "We will do all the things that the Lord has spoken." They're like, "Hey, God, we're with you. Yeah, we like this idea of being on your team. We want those God jerseys, and we are with you. What you say, we're going to pay attention to that. We're with you. You make us something special. You make us your own special possession." And so in verse 9, the Lord says to Moses, "I'm going to come to you in a dense cloud so that the people will hear when I speak." So Moses, he's come down the mountain. He's given the message. He's gone back up. And God tells him, I want you to tell the people this. A cloud is going to descend. And God begins to spell out how this cloud is going to represent His presence. And when they see this cloud descending, they will know that it is me, and they will hear my voice. He says, "And I will speak with you and will always believe you." Moses reported the people's word to the Lord. And so he tells the message to people, and they're like, "Okay, we will pay attention to you." And so the Lord then tells Moses, tell them to clean themselves, consecrate themselves for what's getting ready to happen. And so verse 14, Moses came down, told the people, and so they did. So on the third day after this, when morning came, there's this thunder and lightning, a thick cloud on the mountain, a very loud trumpet sound, so that all the people in the camp shuddered. The presence of the Lord descends on the mountain, and Moses is invited up to be with the Lord. I mean, nobody has had an experience like this before. No one has had an experience quite like this since. And this is an amazing, amazing encounter that they have. And as they have this encounter with the Lord, God has told Moses, I want you also to put some boundaries around the mountain itself, so that if someone comes and touches the mountain, they die. So it's just God and just Moses on the mountain. The cloud is there. There's going to be the voice of God being heard. There's all of these tangible demonstrations of the power of God, of the presence of God. And the people know this. The people know this. There's no ambiguity. Bear that in mind as you flip back to chapter 32. The cloud is still there. They're still able to hear the trembling sound of thunder as the voice of God is uttered. What occurs in chapter 32 does not occur in isolation. They did not just wake up one day and Moses was gone and people started saying, I wonder where he's at. Where did Moses go? They know exactly where he is. They knew exactly with whom he went. They knew exactly the purpose for which he went. They knew all of that stuff. And yet, when Moses delayed in coming down, they come to Aaron and they say, hey, we need a God. And Aaron doesn't say, well, hey, he's on the mountain with our leader. He doesn't say, hey, look at the cloud. Hey, don't you hear the thunder? He doesn't say any of that. The only thing he says is, give me your jewelry and I'll see what I can turn up. How in the world did this happen? It happened because they were waiting. And as you wait, you can begin to get anxious in your thoughts and begin to think and entertain thoughts that otherwise you would not have entertained. And the people at this point, and including now even Aaron, the priest of God, the brother of Moses, are beginning, it seems, to question even the existence now of the Lord himself. Maybe he used to exist, but maybe now something's happened. Maybe God's dead. Maybe he's gone AWOL. Maybe he's through with us. Maybe he's moved on to greener pastures. But we need something. We need someone that we can honor. We need someone that we can follow. And, well, I don't know what's become of God. So we need something else. But bear in mind, bear in mind what all the people had seen to this point. They had observed that God not only worked himself, but God was working through their leader Moses. That God used the plagues, but then he used his spokesman Moses as instrumental in getting them out of Egypt. They watched as the Lord parted the waters of the Red Sea. They watched as God supernaturally guided them with a cloud during the day and this pillar of fire by night. They had seen all of that. And in spite of all of that, because they were waiting, because God isn't telling them the next step, because they don't see exactly what's going on, they're like, well, maybe God's gone. Maybe he's disappeared. Maybe God is dead. But is God doing something? Yes, he is doing something. He is giving to their leader and to them through their leader the whole panoply of his expectations and standards for their behavior that's going to survive for generation after generation after generation. God is doing something of lasting consequence, but they don't see it. And because they don't see it, they think God's not doing anything. In terms of application, that's an important lesson for us as well. Just because you cannot see what God is doing, it does not mean that he has gone on hiatus. It does not mean that he is on vacation. It doesn't mean that he has gone AWOL. Just because you cannot see it does not mean that he is not real, nor that he is not working, and nor that he's not working specifically for your good. But the people and Aaron, because they're waiting, all of that gets called into question. We can't see it, so we don't know what he's doing. Maybe God's done with us. Maybe God's just done, period. Maybe we need a replacement. But not only do they call into question God, they call into question God's man for them. They call into question Moses. Now, this is the guy that for generations now has been used by the Lord to speak to them. Now, hear me in this. Moses is not perfect. There's a slew of times that Moses colors outside the lines. He's no more perfect than you or I. But he was someone that walked with God and someone through whom God was speaking. He was a dependable source of counsel and wisdom for them. He was someone that God was using to guide them to Him and to give the boundaries that they should operate in. And they had observed that for generation after generation. And now what are they doing? Well, I don't know where Moses is, so we're kind of done. We're done with God, we're done with Moses. Oh, wait a minute. Think of all the specificity of chapter 19. All the stuff that God, they had audible evidence. They had visual evidence. They had historical precedent. And yet, because they're waiting, they call into question God Himself and those that God has called alongside them to help keep them following Him. Listen, if it could happen to the priest of God, if it could happen to the very brother of Moses, don't you think it could happen to you? What I'm telling you is that waiting is a dangerous season to be in. We can't avoid it. But you have to be on guard because all too easily you can be tempted both to doubt God and His people. To doubt, well, God, are you even paying attention? Don't you know what's going on? Have you not heard? And because you're not seeing immediate results, because your circumstances aren't being reversed, because you're not seeing what you thought, the door's not open, the guidance hasn't been provided, it seems as though heaven is silent, you can assume like the people of God did, well, God's not doing anything. You begin to doubt Him, and beyond that, you begin to question those that God has used over time to speak truth into your life. That you start not only doubting God's presence, you start ignoring those that God has and consistently used to speak into your life. That's a dangerous, dangerous place to be. Waiting is not only dangerous because it can tempt you to question and doubt both God and His people, waiting can tempt you to heed foolish counsel. Waiting can tempt you to heed foolish counsel. The people have come to Aaron, inviting him, asking him, prompting him to craft an idol for their use. Bear in mind again of whom it is we are speaking. This is not just Joe Blow off the street. This is Moses' brother. This is a guy that's had a front row seat for a long time to the activity of God. This is the priest of the nation, going to be Israel's first high priest. That being said, is there any doubt in your mind as the reader that what Aaron was doing as he is crafting this calf, as he's putting a tail on it, as he's shaping the udders, I don't know, putting horns on it, whatever you do, is there any doubt in your mind as he's doing that he thought he was doing a good thing? Do you think in Aaron's mind that for a moment he thought that somehow, some way, God would be okay with this? Do you think for a moment that he thought that this was anything other than wrong? I believe sincerely that he had enough experience with God, enough expressed standards of God, enough exposure to truth that he knew, I am so profoundly far out of bounds. This is not just wrong, this is crazy, in bold, italics, and underline wrong. But he's still doing it. Again, he's doing something. I think if you push the clock back 3 months, if somebody said, hey, Aaron, do you think you would, can you imagine people just coming to you and saying, hey, how about making us a calf to worship out of gold? That you would say, okay. Do you think for a moment that's going to happen? Oh, no, that would never happen to me. I would never in a million years do that. I know that is so wrong. I would never, ever do something like that. But you fast forward 3 months, and he's sitting there with his smelting tools, crafting this golden calf. How did it happen? What happened in this season, in this time of waiting, but it happened because, and it doesn't seem at all that Aaron dreamt this up. He didn't just wake up that morning and say, you know what, I'm looking for something to do. Is there like a idol kit? Maybe something like VBS craft? I don't know. What could I do? There's no sense that you get whatsoever in the passage that Aaron dreams this up on his own. He does so at the prompting of others. These people have come to him and they say, hey, come make us gods. Well, how about you doing this? Under normal circumstances, would Aaron have paid attention to that? Under normal circumstances, would he respond to such a terrible invitation? Now, I don't think so. But understand this, that which he knew was wrong, what under regular circumstances would have been known to him to be a foolish thing to do, and that this counsel from these people to do this, that would be abhorrent and foolish counsel, because of the experience of waiting, he actually does. He actually does. Here on the 1st of December, it'll mark a year for me since I had back surgery. And it was done on a Friday, and it was like 9:30 or so before they got me back in a room, and they gave me Dilaudid that night, which if you haven't experienced that, it is a glorious anyway, so I had a pretty uneventful night that night. They kept the pain in check. Caroline stayed with me that night, and I was grateful for that. A little before 6 the next morning, they get me up to try to walk a little bit, and I walked, 20, 30 feet or so before I'd had more than I could bear, and I got back in the bed, and they gave me more Dilaudid, and among other things, not only does that deal with pain, but it makes you really, really sleepy. And so at this point, Caroline can tell I'm drifting off, and she says to me, hey, I want to go home and take a shower. I'll be back in a little bit. All right, so she does that. Apparently, she had just left the room when, again, apparently, I get my phone out. I start calling people. Apparently, I called a lot of people. I honestly can't say that I have recollection of a single phone call. I talked to Shep later. I said, did I call you? He said, yes. I said, what did I say? He said, it was just crazy talk. I said, what did you tell me? He said, I told you not to call anyone important. And honestly, for weeks after that, I heard from people who said, hey, you called me the next day after surgery. And consistently, I heard it was whatever I said was just kind of crazy talk. And but again, I have no recollection of that. Now, of all the people that I have called, however many number of people that is, there is no one, I don't believe to this day, that says that Michael is a crazy, deranged person. I don't think there's any of them that would say, you know what, I wouldn't pay attention to what he says. I remember one time he called me and it was just nonsensical gibberish. Now, I think consistently everybody that I called would have said, you know, don't pay attention to that. That was the medicine talking. I mean, he was doped up on some strong stuff, and because of that, he was talking out of his head, acting out of his mind, talking, behaving in ways that he normally wouldn't. But I get a pass for that because, well, I was stretched out on painkillers. I get a pass for that because I was acting out of the norm because I was under the influence of those medicines. I want you to take that thought and put it back together with what we've thought about here and then what's going on in your own experience. Moses comes down from the mountain and he asks Aaron, what have these people done to you? And unfortunately, it's tragic, but I think it's one of the funniest verses in the Bible. He's like, well, they just came, and I said, just give me your gold, and I just threw it in the fire, and this calf just kind of walked out. It's crazy how that happened. I don't know. You know them. They're bent on evil. But Moses knows who to blame, and that's why he's gone to Aaron. He says, what do they do to you? This is on you. But at the end of the day, though Aaron seeks to shift the blame and to move the accountability and to avoid personal responsibility, the onus for this is on Aaron. And at the end of the day, when pressed, why in the world did you do this? This is so out of the norm. This is so out of character. Under normal circumstances, I couldn't imagine you ever doing something like this. At the end of the day, what would Aaron's response be? Well, we had to wait. You had to wait. Yeah, we had to wait for like a number of weeks. There was stuff going on that we didn't know about. So there was stuff that was going on that you didn't know about, and you had to wait. And so somehow you get absolved of responsibility. You get a pass for acting so far out of line. You're doing stuff that under normal circumstances you would never ever do were it not for waiting, but because you had to wait somehow, that's going to be okay? Do you think Moses would have said, okay, no, here, let me punch your ticket, that's okay? Do you think God for a split second was towards Aaron like, okay, no big deal, you just had to wait? No, I don't think for a second that Aaron got a pass. But ultimately, I think that's what his excuse was. I did stuff I would normally never, ever do because I had to wait. At the end of the day, that sounds like a pretty lousy excuse, doesn't it? It really does. Let me caution you as I remind you, if you have a relationship with the Lord, if you have a walk with God, you will have to wait regularly. Sometimes not just for short periods of time, sometimes seasons of time. And as you wait, there's going to be stuff going on that you don't know anything about, and you will be very tempted to begin to doubt God, to doubt those that He has used to speak through you before, and to pay attention to the counsel of people that normally you would just disregard. But just because you're waiting, and because you act out of line, that's not an excuse that God is going to ever accept. So what do you do? What do we do with all this? I think the important thing is to pay attention that we have people walking with God, and we have the example they've left behind. In this case, it's not a good example, and they're going to suffer because of this. I don't know about you. I would rather somebody else have suffered in the past and me learn from that so that I don't experience the same pitfalls. That's pretty good counsel, isn't it? So what do we do? How is it that we don't get ensnared when we have to wait? From my estimation, it involves taking inventory, where you ask yourself a series of questions. Has God thus far been faithful? Has He ever abandoned me? Thus far, has God taken care of me? Do I have any sense where for a moment God has abandoned me? And if the answer is no, and I assure you it will be, why walk away from Him now? If there are those that God has been consistently using in your life to be spiritual encouragers, a source of sound counsel, representatives of truth, there have been those that God has used that clearly are those that know and walk with the Lord. Is there anything about them that has changed where all of a sudden they've embraced heresy, where you shouldn't pay attention to them, that you should ignore them? Have they joined a cult? Have they declared atheism? Have they done any of that stuff? Well, if the answer is no to all of this stuff, let me just tell you what's going on. Your mind is playing tricks on you, and Satan is tempting you to make some terrible, terrible choices. The waiting game is not going to be easy, and it is a dangerous place to be in. I hate that that's the reality, but it just is. You can't avoid the wait. You're going to have to experience it. I am going to have to experience it. But understand this, though the waiting game cannot be avoided, it can be won. It depends on what kind of choices you make. Will you pray with me? As you've heard this morning, I hope you have done so through the lens of your own personal experience. And it may very well be right now that you would say, I am, and I have been for a while, waiting on God. Some of you have been waiting for God to give you an answer as to what you should do between a couple of choices. Some of you may be waiting on God to bring the right person into your life. Some of you might have been waiting on God to present an opportunity to meet a need, to work in some particular way. But when I talk about waiting, you can personalize that. You know of what I speak. You may also know of what it feels like to be tempted to wander. You may know also what it means to begin to call into question, God, do you know what's even going on? Are you paying attention? You may know what it's like from your own experience to call into question the Lord and those that He has used to speak truth into your life. It may be as you have abandoned those things, you have begun to embrace those that are telling you things that under normal circumstances you would say, that's not right. That's not the truth. That is not correct. And as you have been veering off course away from God and His people, you've been paying attention and heeding the counsel of fools. That I assure you, if that happens, you will lose at the waiting game. You will suffer adversely, and you may suffer adversely for generations. We're talking about stuff that matters. You may be at crossroads to make specific decisions that may impact the every day of the rest of your life. As you wait, know the stakes are high. But God does not want to abandon you. He doesn't want to turn you over to the winds of fortune. He wants to guide you. But just because you can't see what He's doing doesn't mean that He's walked away. He hasn't. Will you make some choices today to start winning at the waiting game? Father, as you have shown us through your word and the unpacking of this passage, not only truth, but hopefully, God, through your Spirit, truth as it intersects our own experience. There are things that you can show us about our individual choices and what's going on right now in our lives that need some changes. And as you are showing us that, you don't do it so that we might just say, well, that's nice. You do so in order that we might make a course adjustment. Instead of wandering from you and heeding the counsel of fools, that we head back to you. We get the train back on track. And as you're guiding people to do that, I pray that they'll make those decisions. And God, if they need our help, my help, the help of someone else here, that we'll be sensitive to that. God, if there are others that you're guiding to begin a relationship with you or find out how to begin one, or guiding to begin a relationship formally as a part of the church family here at Gate City, however you're speaking to us, I pray, God, that we will respond. We ask this of you in Jesus' name. Amen. We're going to have now a time of invitation. And it's